Before we start, quick thing. This one actually happened. A regular guy, a delivery driver, is eating his lunch behind a fancy wedding venue when a bride he's never met runs out the side door, grabs his hand, and says 4 words: "Get me out of here." And he did it. He drove off with her. Now, I know what you're thinking, and no, it's not what you think. It's better. So stick with me to the end on this one, because the way it turns out, I did not see coming. Let's get into it.
I've told this story maybe 4 times in my whole life. And every single time the person listening gets to the same spot and stops me and goes, wait, you just drove off with her? A bride? You didn't even know her name? Yeah, that's exactly what I did. So let me back up, because if I just hand you the middle, a woman in a wedding dress grabs my hand and tells me to get her out of there, and I do it, I sound like a lunatic or a criminal. And honestly, for about the first 20 minutes of that drive, I was pretty sure I'd turned into one. My name's Danny Sutton. Back when this happened, I was 34, living in Dayton, Ohio, in a 1-bedroom apartment over a laundromat on the east side. You always knew what day it was by the smell. Sundays, the whole place smelled like fabric softener because everybody did their laundry before the work week. I had a beagle named Waylon, who was, and I mean this with love, the single dumbest animal God ever built. And I drove a delivery van for a company called Holland's Party and Event Rental. Chairs, tables, those big white tents, the folding dance floors, the chafing dishes for the food. If you went to a wedding or a graduation party or a church picnic, anywhere in that county, odds are I dropped off the chairs you sat in and never thought about. That was my life. It wasn't a sad life, I want to be clear about that. It was just small, quiet. I'd been divorced about 2 years by then. Nothing dramatic, no big betrayal. We just got married too young and woke up one day as 2 strangers who were polite to each other. Her name was Steph. Good person. We just ran out of things to say. And when that happens slow, over years, it's almost worse than a big blow-up, because there's nobody to be mad at. There's just this quiet. So, the day it happened. It was a Saturday in June, and it was hot. That thick Ohio hot, where your shirt stuck to your back by 9 in the morning. I had 2 deliveries on the board. First one was a big wedding out at Sycamore Ridge, which was this golf club with a banquet hall. Real nice place. Way out of my price range for anything. Second one was 40 folding chairs for a christening at a church across town. And I had a hard window on that second one, because the christening was at 4, and the family needed the chairs by 2:30 to set up. Remember that detail. The 40 chairs. It matters. So I pull into Sycamore Ridge around 11, and this is a big wedding. Big. Like the kind of wedding where there's a guy whose only job is to point where the other guys should park. Valets. Ice sculpture. There's a string quartet warming up on the lawn. And here's me, backing a beat-up white cargo van with Holland's Rental peeling off the side up to the service entrance. In a polo shirt with a mustard stain I've been pretending not to notice since Tuesday. I unload the extra chairs they ordered. They always order extra. Rich people always order extra. And I stack them where the coordinator points. And then I've got a little dead time before I got to run to the church. So I do what I always do. I go around the back of the building, sit on the tailgate of my van in the shade, and I eat my lunch. Turkey sandwich. Too much mustard. Always too much mustard. I have never in my life gotten the mustard right. And I've got the van radio going, some classic rock station. And I'm just sitting there in the shade watching the heat come up off the parking lot. And I could see part of the property from where I sat. There was this side lawn, and past it a little window into what I guess was the room where the bride gets ready. And I remember thinking, in the dumb way you think about strangers' lives, man, somebody's about to have the biggest day of their life 200 feet from where I'm sitting eating a bad sandwich. And I didn't think another thing about it. Finished my sandwich, balled up the wrapper, checked my watch. I've got maybe 15 minutes before I've got to book it to the church. And that's when the side door bangs open. And she comes out. Now, I want to describe this right, because everybody pictures it wrong. They picture some movie thing. It was not that. She came out that door sideways, kind of stumbling, holding the whole front of her dress up in her fists so she wouldn't trip. And she had her shoes in one hand, these white heels just dangling from 2 fingers. And her hair was half up, half falling. And her face was doing that thing where somebody's not crying yet, but they're one wrong word away from it. That held together look, where the whole face is a dam. And she stops, right there on the grass, barefoot, in this huge white dress. And she looks around like she doesn't even know why she came outside. Like her legs just brought her out there without asking her. And then she sees me. And I swear to you, I did not do anything. I just froze with my sandwich wrapper in my hand like an idiot. But she looks at me, this random guy on a van tailgate, and something in her face just decides. I watched a decision happen on somebody's face. And she walks straight across that lawn, quick, dress dragging through the grass. And she comes right up to me, close. And she grabs my hand. Grabs it. Both of hers around mine. Her hands were freezing, 90 degrees out, and her hands were like ice. And she says, "Get me out of here. Now." And I said, and I'm not proud of this. This is the best my brain could do. I said, "Ma'am, I've got chairs." I said, "I've got chairs." To a runaway bride, because that's the level my brain was operating at. And she didn't laugh, but something flickered, like even in the worst moment of her life, a small dumb thing registered as absurd. And she just said, quieter this time, "Please, there's a van. You're right here. Please, just drive. I'll figure the rest out. I can't be here when they come out that door." And here's the thing I've thought about 1,000 times since. There were about 900 reasons to say no. It's not my business. It's her wedding. Her family's going to think I abducted her. My boss is going to kill me. I've got the christening chairs. It is genuinely insane to put a strange bride in your work van and drive off. But I looked at her hands shaking around mine, and I looked at her face, and I knew. I knew the way you know when someone's not being dramatic, when someone's actually drowning and not performing it. She wasn't cold feet. She was drowning. So I said, "Passenger door sticks. You got to pull it hard." And that's how it started. She climbed up into the cab of my van in a wedding dress, and there was so much dress that it was up over the gear shift, and I had to kind of fight it to get us into reverse, and she's shoving it down and half laughing, half crying. And I pull out of that service lot nice and slow, because the last thing I needed was to peel out like a getaway driver and have somebody get my plate. And we go down the long drive and out onto the main road, and she turned around in her seat and looked back at Sycamore Ridge getting smaller. And then she faced front, and she just exhaled, like she'd been holding that breath for a year. For a while, neither of us said anything. Radio's still going. I turned it down. And I'm driving with no destination, just away. And my hands are at 10 and 2 like I'm taking a driving test, because I have never been so aware of behaving normally in my life. Finally, I said, "I'm Danny." And she said, "Nora." And I said, "Okay, Nora, where am I taking you?" And she said, "I don't know." And then she said it again, smaller. "I don't know. I don't have anywhere. God, I don't have anywhere to go." And that's when the dam broke, and she cried. Not pretty, not movie crying, the real kind, with the ugly sounds, face in her hands, dress everywhere. And I did the only thing I could think of, which was I reached over and turned the AC up and pushed the box of drive-through napkins from the door pocket toward her. And I just let her. I didn't say, "It's okay," because I didn't know if it was. I just drove and let her cry. There's a reservoir off Route 4, north of town. Big, flat gray water, gravel lot, couple of picnic tables nobody ever uses. I don't know why I drove there, except it was quiet and it wasn't anywhere. I parked facing the water and I shut the engine off and I said, "You don't have to talk. But if you want to, I've got nowhere to be." Which was a lie. I had 40 chairs to be with, but you say what you say. And she talked. Her name was Nora Kessler. She was 28. She taught second grade. The little ones, the 7-year-olds, the age where they still hug you and lose their teeth. And she'd been with the guy, Brett, for 3 years. And Brett, and this is the part that got me, because I kept waiting for the villain, the cheater, the monster. Brett wasn't a bad guy. That's what she kept saying. He's not a bad guy. Everybody loves him. That's the whole problem. Everybody loves him. Brett came from money. His family had a couple of car dealerships, and his mother, Diane, was one of those women who ran everything with a smile so tight it could cut glass. And Nora told me how it happened, and it was the saddest, most ordinary thing. She didn't get trapped in one big moment. She got trapped in 1,000 tiny ones. Diane took over the wedding planning just to help. The flowers became Diane's flowers. The song became Diane's song. The guest list was 400 people, and she knew maybe 40 of them. And every time Nora tried to say, "Wait, this doesn't feel like me," everybody around her would light up and squeeze her hand and go, "Isn't this wonderful?" And she just couldn't be the one to blow it all up. Everybody was so happy. All that money spent. All those people flying in. And then she told me about her dad. Her dad, Walt, died 14 months before. Heart attack in his own garage on a Tuesday. And Walt had never warmed up to Brett. Not because Brett did anything, just dads know. And after Walt died, Nora said, everything got fast. The engagement, the date, all of it. And she realized, sitting in that bridal suite that morning, why she'd let it all happen. Because calling off a wedding is a kind of grief, and she already had all the grief she could carry. It was easier to just let the train run than to lie down on the tracks and stop it. And then she told me the exact moment she ran. She said she was standing in that little room in the dress, and they'd just done all the photos, and Diane had fixed her veil for the 10th time, and Nora looked around the room and she went looking, actively looking for one single thing in that whole day that was hers. One thing. And there was nothing. Not the flowers, not the song, not the people, not the dress even. Diane picked the dress. And then she looked out the window. and she saw a guy sitting on a van, eating a sandwich in the sun with the radio on. Just some regular guy in the regular world having a completely ordinary Saturday. Free. And she said she looked at me and thought, I want to be over there. I want to be back in the normal world. I don't want to be in here. And then she walked out, and I happened to be the door. Now here's where, if this were a movie, we'd fall into each other's arms at the reservoir. We did not. God, we did not. Because about then her phone, which she'd shoved down the front of the dress of all places, her phone started going off like a slot machine. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Brett, Diane, her mom, her sister, her maid of honor. Buzz, buzz, buzz. And she just held it in her lap and stared at it, gone white. And I could see her about to fold, about to say, take me back. I'll just go back. It's easier. And I said, and I don't know where this came from, I said, hey, Nora, you don't have to go back. And you don't have to not go back. Right this second, you don't have to do anything. But somebody in that phone loves you and is scared. So maybe pick one person, the one who's on your side no matter what, and just tell him you're safe. That's it. Nothing else. And she looked at me for a second, and she called her sister. I got out of the van to give her privacy, stood by the water, and I could hear pieces of it. I'm okay, Katie. I'm okay, I just couldn't do it. And the crying started again, but it was a different crying this time. The kind after the worst is over. And while I'm standing there by that gray water, my own phone rings. It's Holland's, my boss. And I remember the christening, the 40 chairs. It's 1:40. I'm 40 minutes across town from a church that needs chairs at 2:30, and I have a bride in my van. So I answer, and Hollins goes, Sutton, where the hell are you? St. Michael's is calling. And I look back at the van, at this woman in a wedding dress on my bench seat crying to her sister, and I said, Boss, I need you to trust me and send Manny with the backup van to St. Michael's. I've got a situation. I'll explain Monday. It's not, nobody's hurt. I just can't leave right now. And there was this long pause. And Hollins, who I'd worked for 6 years and who I don't think ever once said a soft word to me, Hollins goes, Is it the kind of situation where you're going to need Monday off? And I said, I don't know yet. And he said, Send me the church's number. I'll handle it. Don't do anything stupid. 6 years. That was the nicest he ever was to me, right then. Katie, the sister, she lived about an hour south near Cincinnati, and she said she was already getting in her car. So we made a plan to meet halfway at a diner off the interstate, one of those chrome ones that's open 24 hours. And I drove Nora there. And that drive was different than the first one. The panic was gone. What was left was this exhausted, wrung-out quiet. And we actually talked. Little stuff. I told her about Waylon, the dumb beagle. She laughed, a real one, when I told her he once got his head stuck in the fence and just stood there wagging, thrilled about it. I told her about Steph, about the quiet divorce. She told me about her second graders, about a kid named Deshaun who decided she was getting married to him, not Brett, and how she was going to have to explain on Monday that there was no wedding at all now. We got to the diner. And here's a thing I'll never forget. She's sitting across from me in a booth, in a full wedding dress, veil balled up in her purse, and the waitress comes over, older lady, seen everything, and doesn't blink. Just goes, You two want menus, or you know what you want? Like brides come in off the interstate every day. and Nora ordered a chocolate milkshake and a plate of fries at 2 in the afternoon on her wedding day. And I don't think anything in my life ever looked more like freedom than that. Katie showed up about an hour later, and there was a lot of crying. The good kind, sister's kind, and Katie hugged me. This stranger hugged me hard and said thank you about 4 times. And I felt like a fraud, because all I did was own a van. And then, this is the part people don't like, because it's not the movie. Then I left. I paid for the milkshake. I said, "Take care of yourself, Nora," and I drove home. Because it wasn't my story. It was hers. And a decent guy doesn't turn the worst day of a woman's life into the day he shot his shot. So I drove back to Dayton, and I fed Waylon, and I sat on my couch, and I thought, well, that was the strangest day of my life. And I figured that was the end of it. Some things aren't yours to keep. You just get to be the door. Except she'd left something in my van. When it got cool by the reservoir, I'd given her my jacket, this beat-up gray zip-up I kept behind the seat. And she'd worn it into the diner over the dress and forgot to give it back, and I forgot to ask. Didn't even notice for 2 days. And about 5 weeks later, 5 weeks, I'd stopped thinking about it almost. There's a knock on my apartment door on a Sunday, the whole building smelling like fabric softener. And I open it, and it's her. In regular clothes, jeans, a green top, hair down, holding my jacket, washed and folded, and a little brown paper bag. And she's nervous, shifting her weight, and she goes, I asked your boss where you lived. He shouldn't have told me. Don't be mad at him. Thanks, Hollins. And she holds out the jacket. And then she holds out the paper bag, too, and she says, and this, because you didn't even let me buy you a coffee for what you did. I open the bag. It's a turkey sandwich. And she goes, quiet, kind of red in the face. I noticed at the diner you didn't order anything. And that day, before all of it, I watched you eat a sandwich in the sun, and it looked like the best thing in the world. So, she got the mustard right. First person in my life to get the mustard right. We stood in that doorway and talked for 2 hours. She never came in. I never asked. We just stood there. She told me she'd called off everything, properly. She'd sat down with Brett, actually with Brett, alone, no Diane, and told him the truth, that it was never his fault. It was hers for not being brave a year sooner. And he took it better than everyone expected. She said returning gifts to 400 people is its own special kind of hell. She'd moved in with Katie for a bit, then got her own little place. She was still teaching. Deshawn had forgiven her. And at the end of those 2 hours, on my doorstep, she said, I know how this looks, and I don't want you to think the day you met me was the worst day of my life. And I don't want to be a person who confuses the guy who rescued her with. I don't want to do that to you. So I'm not going to ask you for anything. But I'd really like it if I could buy you that coffee. Just coffee. As a person. Not the van, just a person you met. And I said, yeah. Yeah, I'd like that. So we took it slow, and I mean slow. Coffee that first time, and we both were so careful. Like we each knew this thing had started upside down, and we wanted to set it right side up before we trusted it. Weeks went by between the coffee and the first real dinner. She wanted to be sure she was choosing me and not choosing an escape hatch. And I wanted to be sure I wasn't some guy taking advantage of the strangest day of a woman's life. We actually talked about all that, out loud, which 2 years earlier in my marriage I could never have done. Say the real thing out loud. But somehow with her, because we started at the bottom, there was nowhere to go but honest. She met Waylon. Waylon, being the dumbest dog alive, fell in love with her instantly and completely and lay across her feet like a rug. Good judge of character, that dog, underneath the stupid. It's 4 years now. 4 years this June. We got married last fall. Nothing like the other one. God, nothing like it. 30 people. Her sister Katie stood up for her. My buddy from Holland stood up for me. We did it in her mother's backyard, and Nora wore a dress she picked herself, off a rack, on sale, and I have never seen anything better in my life. And you know what her one non-negotiable was? The one thing she planned herself, top to bottom, and let nobody touch? The food. She wanted it to be exactly what she wanted. And the caterer? We did a whole thing, a little joke nobody else got. There were turkey sandwiches on a silver tray with little flags in them. Right the mustard. She's in the kitchen right now, actually, as I'm telling you this. It's a Tuesday, nothing special about it. She's grading her little kid's spelling test and complaining about one boy's handwriting, and Waylon's asleep under her chair, and the radio's on low. And every so often I catch myself just looking at all of it, this ordinary Tuesday. And I think about how the best thing that ever happened to me started on the worst day of hers. How she was standing at a window looking for one single thing in the whole world that was actually hers. And it turned out to be a guy in a van, eating a sandwich with the radio on. I've got chairs. That's what I said to her. The love of my life tells me to get her out of there, and I said, I've got chairs. Thank God I didn't have too many.